Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics and, well, the anti-Semitism issue within Labour has surfaced again, but in an intriguing way this time. So first of all, if you've followed my channel for any length of time, you'll know my views on Jeremy Corbyn when it relates to anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. But for others, the way I have seen it and the way I continue to see it is as follows. 1. Jeremy Corbyn isn't a racist. He's not an anti-Semite. He criticises the actions of Israel as he does for any nation that commits human rights abuses, including the UK. 2, he does occupy a very left-wing position in politics, and like a great many people on the very left wing, just like people on the very right wing, he prefers to sit in an echo chamber. He mistrusts those not in that position and surrounds himself with people who hold those views as far as possible. 3, when it comes to racism and prejudice, the far right of politics doesn't have a monopoly. There is a big old cluster of anti-Semitism on the far left of politics. And 4, Jeremy Corbyn is not a bridge builder. He has kept the bulk of his parliamentary Labour Party, who represent a much broader cross-section of the left wing of politics than his own cabal at arm's length. That means he has only a relatively small number of allies to surround himself with, which in turn has increased the chances of anti-Semites being in the decisions and other processes of the Labour Party. Now, the bottom line is that there have been problems with anti-Semitism in Labour. They have gone completely unchecked. Nobody blames the leadership if someone in the party expresses these abhorrent views. The leadership is only to blame if it doesn't take robust action when it's brought to their attention. And this is not something that's cooked up by the Tory newspapers, as Corbyn allies would try and point out. Sure, they're all over it when it surfaces, and they magnify it as much as possible. But I don't get my information from Tory rags. I'm a Labour member, and I know Labour members who are much more intimately involved in the process of the party than I am. Anti-Semitism is not being dealt with by Labour. That's a fact, no matter how some people would like to stick their head in the sand and ignore it. Like I said, there is a cluster of anti-Semitic feelings on the far left of politics. It's not a majority. I'm not saying the majority of people in that position are, but there is a spike, and it's definite and it's noticeable. I'm on the left wing myself. I'm quite far on the left wing myself, though I'd like to think I don't discriminate based on race or religion. Well, except for Satanists, I suppose. I am a Christian after all. Oh, and Jedi. Never liked Luke. I've always been a bigger fan of Vader. But aside from that, I hope I'm relatively prejudice-free. As far as those traits go at any rate, no one is free of prejudice. And Corbyn also, in my view, is clearly not prejudiced along those lines either. However, my reading of the situation was that every time one of his allies was recorded making these statements, that Corbyn was probably placed in a bit of a quandary. If Labour takes the appropriate action, then he loses a dwindling stock of allies. But if he shields them, then he might fool himself he's doing it for the greater good of society. And that's the only thing that made sense for me. He was the leader of the Labour Party, as he still is. The systems set up to deal with these issues are his responsibility, even though he doesn't need direct oversight himself. And it has been very evident that people have said the most terrible things and been allowed to continue membership of the party, sometimes in quite senior positions. That simply would not have happened under previous leaders. But some rather interesting news, as I say, has come to light this weekend. Dame Margaret Hodge, a very distinguished member of Labour, had a conversation with Jeremy Corbyn about this very issue a while ago. Now, because she didn't trust him, she covertly recorded the conversation, and it's just as well she did. Now, although the tape's recording does show that the details of what happened during the conversation were falsified, it also points to the fact that Jeremy Corbyn himself, far from actively shielding anti-Semites from expulsion, just because they were his allies, was concerned that it was going on behind his back. Now, it seems to suggest that he wanted robust systems that worked, but he feared that the people carrying them out were not doing it properly. Now, of course, he could just have been saying that to Dame Margaret to divert blame from himself. However, I'd be willing to believe it. It doesn't absolve him of blame, of course. He's still leader and still responsible. And if he even had suspicions that those overseeing the process were not up to the job, then he should have investigated and he should have replaced them. The fact that the leaked documents which were reported in the newspaper relating to that conversation were at complete odds with the actual conversation that took place, that we know about because it was recorded, means that in Dame Margaret's own words, either he was lying, referring to Corbyn, or was being lied to. And if Corbyn really was wanting to have the issue dealt with properly, Why would he allow a false version of events to be reported in the newspaper unchallenged? Now, Dame Margaret, as well as releasing the recording, is one of several Labour MPs that are now calling for a fully independent body to deal with these complaints. And not just related to anti-Semitism, but all forms of racism, harassment and bullying. And people keep trying to say that I have an anti-Corbyn bias, but try and think about what that is. I'm not against him because of his policies. I'm not centre-left, I'm left-wing. I broadly agree with a great many of his policies and would like to see much of his vision for the UK come to fruition, as part of the EU, of course. I'm also not against beards. I can't be arsed shaving myself most of the time. What I object to are three things. One, he is ineffective in opposition. The Conservative Party is in such a shambles that dealing its serious damage should be child's play. I could do it. Tony Blair would have destroyed them by now, utterly destroyed them. But even less effective leaders, less effective debaters would also have done so, quite frankly. He has not. Two, he's a man who is constantly voting against his own party as a backbench MP, but demands complete loyalty from his backbenchers now that he's the leader. Except for his natural allies, of course. They're allowed to rebel against his whips with impunity. He's a weak leader. Three, he has allowed the Labour Party, a party which stands for inclusivity, to be labelled as institutionally racist. Now, for me, it makes little difference whether he is actively shielding fascists in his party or just allowing others to shield them. It's happening, and an independent complaints body carrying out the investigations would prevent it. If he really does want to put the issue to bed, but just doesn't know how to do it himself, then what I would hope is that he takes this request seriously. But the fact that a load of Labour MPs have had to write a letter formally to him suggests that they've already brought it up informally with him and he hasn't gone anywhere with it. So I'm not hopeful. The problem is that constantly coming out with the same bland statements of all complaints about anti-Semitism are fully investigated in line with our rules and procedures and any appropriate disciplinary action is taken is clearly a load of rubbish to anyone in the Labour Party with their eyes open. And yes, Tory newspapers would publish it whether or not it were true, but it is true. So that just makes their job easier. So congratulations. Denying that this thing exists makes the job of Tory newspapers and the Conservatives themselves easier. It makes it easier for Conservatives to stay in power. And that's why I'm opposed to it, and that's why I'm opposed to his leadership. So anyway, I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to like, comment down below, of course. Click the subscribe button if you're not already, and the bell notification as well, please. And until next time, I'll see you later.